This agreement is indicative of a new era in Indian foreign policy, an era in which India will see all the world's powers as potential partners in efforts to address its own needs and the needs of others. Mr. President, I believe that this new era will bring increased stability and progress in South Asia. I see the bill before us as approving far more than just a nuclear agreement. Among other things, it'll set the stage for a stronger U.S.-India relationship, which will be critical, in my view, of critical importance to our country in the 21st century. Mr. President, the Committee on Foreign Relations held an in-depth hearing on the U.S.-India agreement just last month. The committee, along with the House Committee on Foreign Affairs, worked closely with the administration to address the technical concerns expressed about this agreement. This extraordinary consultation resulted in the bill that will improve the U.S. implementation of the accord and assure that nuclear nonproliferation remains at the core of U.S. foreign policy. Our committee approved a bill identical to the House-passed bill by a vote of 19-2. And again, I want to commend Chairman Howard Berman in the House. I want to commend Senator Lugar again for his leadership on this issue as well. This agreement is not a partisan issue. My colleagues should be aware that this effort began under the Clinton administration, where President Clinton, to his credit, launched this initiative, and President Bush pushed it to fruition. So now two administrations, a Democratic and Republican one, have been behind this effort over the last number of years. This agreement had strong support on both sides of the political aisle in 2006, when we voted on the Henry Hyde Act, establishing the underlying principles and requirements of this accord. Indeed, 85 of us in this body supported the Hyde Act, with only 12 voting against it. I believe the resulting agreement has strong support today, and hope our colleagues will support it. Mr. President, throughout our work on this agreement, we have sought to address concerns expressed in the United States as well as in India. Some nuclear nonproliferation experts have voiced a fear that this agreement would lead India, and then India's neighbors, to increase the production of nuclear weapons. Some experts have warned that giving India the right of peaceful nuclear commerce, despite its refusal to sign the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, could undermine the world's willingness to abide by that vital treaty and to enforce compliance with it. We have been consistently vigilant to such risks, and the Hyde Act and this bill give us the tools, I believe, to remain so in the future. The process that led the United States-India agreement was undertaken with an eye to achieving progress of nonproliferation issues, and pursuant to a declaration issued in July of 2005 by President Bush and Prime Minister Singh, it is important that I note the following. India has improved its export control laws and regulations. India has moved to the Nuclear Suppliers Group and the Missile Technology Control Regime. India has also affirmed that it will not transfer equipment or technology for uranium enrichment or spent fuel reprocessing to any nation that does not already have a full-scale functioning capability. India has also reaffirmed, both to our country and to the Nuclear Suppliers Group, its unilateral moratorium on nuclear testing. India has initialed and intends to sign a safeguards agreement with the IAEA. India has begun to negotiate an additional protocol to that safeguards agreement, and India will bring under IAEA safeguards over a dozen existing or planned nuclear facilities that were not previously subject to any safeguards. The bill before the United States Senate provides additional measures that guide the implementation of the agreement, and they're worthy of note. This agreement reaffirms our approval of the agreement, that the agreement is based on U.S. interpretations of its terms. In other words, it reaffirms that President Bush's assurances about fuel supplies are a political commitment and are not necessarily legally binding. It requires the President to certify that approving this agreement is consistent with our obligation under the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty not to assist or encourage India to produce nuclear weapons. Before the Nuclear Regulatory Commission can issue any licenses under this agreement, India's safeguards agreement with the IAEA must first enter into force. In addition, India must file a declaration of civilian nuclear facilities under the safeguards agreement that is not materially inconsistent with the separation plan that India issued in 2006. We know that there will be some changes because the 2006 plan envisioned safeguards beginning that year rather than 2 years later. but this guards against a declaration that flatly contradicts India's promises. The bill also requires prompt notification of the Foreign Relations Committee if India should diverge from its separation plan in implementing the Safeguards Agreement. The bill also establishes a procedure for congressional review and possible rejection of any subsequent arrangement under the agreement that would allow India to reprocess spent nuclear fuel that is derived from U.S.-supplied reactor fuel or produced with U.S.-supplied equipment. Article 6 of the India Agreement anticipates such a subsequent arrangement if India builds a new reprocessing facility dedicated to its civilian nuclear power sector. Congress should have a special role in this, I would add, because spent fuel reprocessing can produce weapons-grade plutonium. This is an improvement over current law, which allows such arrangements to take effect 15 days after public notice is given in the Federal Register. The bill requires the President to certify that it is U.S. policy to work in the Nuclear Suppliers Group to achieve further restrictions on transfers of enrichment and reprocessing equipment or technology. And the bill also directs the President to seek international agreement on procedures to guard against the diversion of heavy water from civilian to military programs. The India agreement has protections for heavy water that the United States may supply or that is produced with U.S.-supplied equipment. We need to get supplier countries to adopt similar standards. And this was, I might add, the subject of some lengthy conversation at the committee hearing on this very, very matter, talking about the heavy water issue and what could be produced by that. And I'm left that committee hearing confident that the administration intends to pursue these matters very aggressively. And the bill requires regular reports on the executive branch's progress in its efforts on enrichment and reprocessing limits and on protecting against heavy water diversion. Mr. President, that's a lot to consume here, and I'll be happy to make any of this I've just said available to my colleagues today to go over and review, and staff is here who've worked on this very, very diligently over the last number of years to respond to any member or member staff's questions about the details of all of this. It can be somewhat complicated when you get into the issues of heavy water and physics involved, but nonetheless, there are important points that I want my members to be confident about as they consider their vote on this very important bill.